Friends, welcome to beautiful, rainy Slovenia. We are here to drive the 2017 C63 AMG Convertible. Not perfect weather, if I'm honest. So I am going to switch to rain gear here in advance of our full first drive review. Why don't you and I do a tech review and go through not just the C63 but the C convertible range, and we should probably start where we always start, the engine. Okay, so let's use the full-fat C63 as a stand-in for all of the C convertibles. It starts with the C300. Now, we've driven that engine before in a couple of different applications. That is the 4-cylinder, 2-liter, inline, direct-injected, turbocharged engine. That is 241 horsepower, but more interestingly, 273 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at a very low engine speed, 1,300 RPM. Then we move up to the new C43 convertible. They're going to make that in a coupe as well, and we will have that on the show later on down the road. And that is a 3-liter twin-turbo V6. That's 362 horsepower, but more interestingly, it's 384 pound-feet of torque out of a twin-turbo V6. That's pretty good. And it comes in at 2,000 RPM, stays flat all the way to 4,000 RPM. Then we move on to this, the favorite one that I like, and that is the one that is built by Patrick Vogel in this case. This is a 4-liter twin-turbo V8. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's in the AMG GT. Now we covered this in the C63 Coupe. It is technically the same engine, but there are some changes, namely this one is not a dry sump lubrication system. And it comes in 2 flavors. There is like the, I guess, half sugar version, and that is the C63. That's a lowly 469 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at also a very low engine speed, 1,750 RPM, stays flat all the way to 4,500 RPM. Then there's this. This one is the full-fat C63 and it goes to 503 horsepower, but more importantly, 516 pound-feet of torque, which comes in also at 1,750 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,500 RPM. Now, in the full first drive review, we're going to drive this one. Later on down the line, we'll drive the other 2, but notice in this one, the 2 turbos sit in the V. In the full first drive review, you and I will spend some time in terms of the logic of why they sit there and the 2 main benefits. So with that, let's press on to the bits that affect driving dynamics. So, yeah, right about the time we were pressing on to driving dynamics, the sky literally opened. And we didn't seem to have a couple of sets of animals and an arc on hand, so let's try this a bit of a different way. The base C-Class convertible to 300 can be fitted any way you want as long as it's 2-wheel drive. However, there are some differences in the transformation from coupe to convertible. First and foremost is the steel spring setup. It actually sits a bit lower, so the ride height's been lowered. And then second is actually the height of the vehicle. It's maybe 0.2 of an inch taller than the coupe. Then there's the C43 version of the convertible, and frankly, this is one of the more interesting flavors. Now, we kind of already drove this one, but more in a sedan version. It was called a C450 AMG Sport back then. Make sure you check out that episode. But basically what this does is it's an all-wheel drive convertible, but it kind of goes one step further than what we've driven in like Audis, where you know Audis have the split of 60-40 with the 60 in the back. What the engineers in Alfatebach did is they've changed it to 31 in the front to 69 in the back, and it can vary a bit based on traction loss, but ultimately there is much more power going to the rear of the car. Now, the power gets to the wheels in either case, the 300 or the 43, with that 9G tronic transmission, which we've now driven in a couple of different cars, in that SL550, the GLE 450, and the C450 AMG, so make sure you go back and check out those episodes. And that is definitely different than the full-fat C63 model, which is a 7-speed multi-clutch unit. But speaking of full-fat, let's go back to a point in our shoot day here where the weather was just a bit more cooperative. So we need to separate this between the C63 and the C63. So in the C63, the brakes, for example, they are basically 14.2-inch diameter rotors, front and rear. But if you were to move up to the C63S, which this is, that goes to 15.4-inch diameter rotors in the front, stays with a 14.2 in the rear. Now this one, let's just say we should probably be doing an options game on this one, because this one's got virtually everything. This has got the carbon ceramic rotors, and it's basically 15.8 in the front on the diameter. So let's put aside the brakes and let's press on to some of the bits underneath the car. Now, do you remember in the C63S episode, the Coupe, we spent a lot of time talking about the dimensions of this car has changed drastically from the sedan. Now, let's just kind of recap here. In the front of the Coupe, you had about a little over 2 inches increase in width. In the rear, it's about 2.5 inches increase in width. Same thing carries over here. So basically, the car is sitting on a wider track, so that's definitely going to affect driving dynamics. Then we need to press on to the actual chassis controls. So we've driven in virtually every Mercedes, down from like a GLC all the way up to like that S63 Coupe. There is basically a dynamic control system. Soft, meaning comfort mode, all the way up to either Sport Plus or race mode in a car like this. Well, this changes a bit in that there's a ride control system fitted as standard, and that's really no different than a C63 or a C63S in terms of the coupe or the sedan. But really what the ride control does is it separates out the adjustable dampers from the rest of the different mappings, like the engine and the transmission. Follow me thus far? Now we got to move to the rear. So basically on a C63, there is a mechanical diff. Remember how we got excited in the SL63 episode, how they finally fitted a mechanical diff to the rear of the SL, which made it, I would argue, a little bit better than the normal GT. Same situation here, but then this one is a C63, as we've discussed. This one has an electronic limited slip differential. Oh yes, as pretty as that spot was, it rained there too. So as I was saying about that E-diff, most of these things are brake actuated nowadays, which is to say they're not really that responsive. But we're seeing a trend where a number of manufacturers are starting to install these electrically actuated clutches to send the torque where it's needed, and this is not an exception. So we've seen this on the C63S Coupe when we drove it on Circuito Ascari, and here it carries into the convertible. And there's another like neat whiz-bang trick in here where it's got the adjustable engine mounts, so think like Porsche Sport Chrono, but this is a Mercedes with a V8 engine where it sits in the front that has this thing. And with that, I feel like we haven't addressed the elephant in the room here, and that is the actual roof. But being it's been pissing down rain all day, why don't we save that for the full first drive review, so make sure you come back for that. But there are some other neat tricks here that we can discuss that have something to do with the rain, and that is, believe it or not, the mirrors. So the mirrors, notice they don't sit in the actual sail part of the door, they actually sit on the doors themselves. And this is one of these like happy incidences where like the scientists that deal with the aerodynamics and the designers actually agreed for like the one time in their lives. And really it's not a function of look there, it's actually a function of function. Number one, it actually lowers the wind noise that goes around the mirrors. But in cases where you're dealing with lots of rain, like today, you can see where the actual water can be channeled. There's like these bits on the side, these lips. They're not there for like design or aerodynamics. They're designed to get the water away from the mirror itself. Something I wouldn't have found out if it didn't piss down rain today. So with that, what do we got? Well, a very high-tech convertible, which we'll have to spend more time talking about in the full first drive review, and a very challenging shoot day. Actually, the rain wasn't the only thing that interrupted us. We actually had a more pleasant interruption. Here, I'll just show it to you rather than tell it to you. I want to scare these people. And with that incredibly picturesque Gulf of Trieste moment, I want to leave you guys with a question, a straightforward one at that. Here we are discussing a folding soft-top convertible von Deutschland. But really my question is about packaging. Do you prefer a folding soft-top, or do you prefer a folding hardtop? And don't just tell me which one you prefer, but tell me why you prefer that type of packaging. And for good measure, let me know what region of the world you hail from, and if you daily drive one of these types of convertibles. Let me know in the comments below, or via our social media at MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave you with two things. Number one, make sure you download our fancy new mobile application, which you can download for free at Apple iTunes and Google Play. And number two, instead of telling you a fun fact, I'm going to show you a fun fact from yesterday when the weather was better as we were traipsing around the beautiful countryside of Slovenia. It's one of these situations where what are you going to do about it? So you got to stop and smell the roses. So in this case, the roses are really not roses, they're a tractor. But look at what kind of tractor it is. You know the old story of how the sports cars got started? Well, this is how they got started. So there really are Lamborghini tractors, even today, in places like Slovenia.